Hi there and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I'm Marcus, although I'm feeling like get a fix today and want to pre-review a game that's currently on Spieleschmiede or Gameforge in Germany, for the guys who prefer the English translations. The game name is Dolmen and is basically a reprint of the original Dolmengötter. I think it's Gods of the Dolmen. But the designers are planning for some optional expansions that will bring some more flavor into the already cool base game. Yes, it's a German campaign, but really fear not, as this project is US friendly, which means that shipping to the US comes relatively cheap, but as far as I understood, shipping charges to other countries are relatively low as well, especially around Europe, I guess. And for possible German buyers or backers, shipping to Germany is free. In Dolmen, each player controls some druids who want to praise their gods by building the biggest dolmens. Those druids earn points by making sure their dolmens are in a good position when a stone circle is being scored. By the way, here you see the prototype of the new game board, and it has to be mentioned that one of the stretch goals will bring a double-sided game board with, I guess, a different stone circle setup. So that's definitely already worth backing it. And of course, the player with the most victory points by the end of the game is the best druid and wins himself a keg of Cervisia. And this would be the original game board of Dolmengötter, and all the other components that you see here are also from the original game, so those may or may not change in the new game. Dolmen is a Eurogame through and through, so expect a lot of wooden pieces, and of course you see the mandatory cloth bag, even though it doesn't have any function in the game. In a 3-player game, each player grabs himself 13 stones, 4 druids in his color, and uses 10 dolmen throughout the game. 1 with a value 4, 2 with a value 3, 3 with a value 2, and guess what? 4 with a value 1. This value is hidden information for the other players and represents basically the power of the appropriate god. But in the end, it's basically a multiplier that will define how many points you get when a stone circle is completed. The smallest player places his or her first druid. In the old German rules, it's not really clear if they mean the height or the age, but I guess it doesn't really matter. You should be able to find a way to determine the starting player on your own. After the first player has placed his or her first druid, each other player places his or her first druid on the game board. And this goes on until all players have placed their 3 active druids on the game board. Then you can basically start playing and try to do that with Arkham Horror. But don't forget that 1 druid goes to the victory points, starting with 4 victory points. The game can end in 2 different ways. The first one is when 1 player places his last dolmen on the game board. Each other player still has 1 more turn and then the game ends. The second condition is when the last stone of all players is placed on the game board. In this case, the game ends immediately, but dolmens can still be erected though. Either way, all unfinished stone circles will still be scored at the end of the game, as not every stone circle has to be as cool as Stonehenge. As soon as all the druids are placed, the starting player can take his first turn. He can choose exactly 1 of the following actions. For once, he can move 1 of his druids to an adjacent stone place. You can jump over other druids, but never over stone places or empty stone places here. So when you move to an adjacent empty location, but you are allowed to jump over other druids. These can be druids of your color or any other player's color. When you move, you can place a stone of your color on the space the druid left. If you choose not to leave a stone behind, you have to reduce your victory points by 1, which is the reason you start the game with 4 victory points. If you only have 1 victory point, you are not allowed to leave the space empty. But of course, there's the exception that you still have to have some stones left. So, if you don't have any stones left, you cannot leave them behind. Simple as that. The second possible action for a druid is to collect some herbs. When you choose to collect herbs, you turn this druid on his belly, just like that. Why should you collect herbs? Good question, and this is the way to prepare for the third possible action, which you can take during your next turn. When a druid collected herbs during your last turn, you can perform the Flight of the Druids. I have no idea what kind of herbs these guys were collecting though. The Flight of the Druids allows you to move this druid to any free stone space somewhere on the game board. Basically the only way to move a locked druid, but of course you have to lose a turn for the preparation. So in this case this druid would be locked, so he cannot move here, here or there because these are stone spaces, so he might consider jumping in maybe, yeah, down there. These were basically all the actions you can take during your turn. Sounds easy, right? Now we come to the more delicate part of the game, and that is how you place your dolmens and score the stone circles. You can place a dolmen as soon as you have the majority in the stone circle. Like that. And here the really innovative part of the game comes into place, as you can only have a majority when you are not alone in a stone circle. So you always need at least one another player to actually score points. As soon as you have the majority in a stone circle, you can place one of your dolmens, like this, in the middle of the circle. Keep in mind that the dolmens have different values, but you are always allowed to check your own dolmens, of course. As soon as another player equalizes the majority, he is allowed to place a dolmen under the current dolmen, so like this one here. Placing dolmens is always optional, and there's no real penalty associated with it when not doing so. The next player who generates a majority can again place one of his dolmens on top of all the other dolmens here. It's important to mention that dolmens on top of the stack may provide more points than dolmens on the bottom of the stack. The stone circles will get scored once these are completed, or by the end of the game, of course. And now it's time to reveal the power of the dolmens, as these are the multiplayers for the actual victory points. And depending on the size of the actual stone circle, you can score some points. The formula is the value of the Dolmen god multiplied with a scoring factor. But what the heck is the scoring factor? This is basically printed in the center of each stone circle. So the biggie here has a scoring factor of 5, at least for the dolmen on top. The second dolmen in this stack would have a factor of 4, the third dolmen a factor of 3, and so on. I think you get the picture. You always start on top, even if the maximum number of dolmens is not reached in a stone circle. So this top dolmen with a value of 4 is multiplied with a factor 5, as it's on top of the stack. The player scores 20 victory points for that. The second stone with a value of 3 in this case is multiplied with a factor 4, as it's the second stone in the stack. You get the math, I guess. He scores 12 points. Germany 12 points. Sorry for the little Eurovision insider here. If a stone circle with a size of 8 has all 6 dolmens, the player at the bottom of the stack gets nothing, as 0 multiplied by 1, 2 or 3 or 4 equals 0 in the end. Let's do a little example of how to play some dolmens, and lazy as I am, I will use the example from the original rulebook. Apologies for that. So, first, red moves druid and places a stone. As he's currently alone in respect to stones, there is no majority, of course. 2. Yellow places a stone here. Still, no majority and no equalization, as there was no majority before. 3. Green places a stone here. And guess what? Still no majority. 4. Now yellow places yet another stone, like this, And finally, we have a majority for the yellow player, allowing him to place a dolmen in the middle of the stone circle, which he will do now. 5. Red wants to have a piece of the cake and places another stone. With that, he equalized the majority of the yellow player, so he can place a dolmen below the first dolmen, which he also does, of course. 6. Green also places himself another stone in the circle, and he also equalized with the original majority of the yellow player, so he can place a dolmen below both existing dolmens. Of course, he does the same. 7. Mean Green places yet another stone and gains the majority. So now he's allowed to place another dolmen, but this time he can place it on top of all the other dolmens. Isn't that nice? 8. Red wants to move up his first dolmen, so he decides to equalize the majority of the green player. So again, he puts a dolmen on the bottom of the stack here. And as you can see, now the stone circle is completed, and we would come to the actual scoring, which leads to number 9. Now I need something to drink. Let's do some example scoring based on this result here. So the top value of this dolmen is 5. I multiplied with the value being the number 4. In this case, green would score 20 victory points. Now we would have the factor of 4 because it's the second stone. We multiplied by 3. In this case, yellow would score himself 12 points. Now we would come to the multiplier of 3. Multiplied by 2, that's 6 victory points for red. Then 2, that's 2 victory points for green. And 1 victory points for the red player. If there would be another dolmen below that one, this player would score 0 victory points. And this is basically how you play dolmen. As mentioned before, you can purchase some expansions which will allow you to play Zoldo, so you get the ritual expansion, which provides some task cards which might give you additional ways to score some points, and you can also go for the burial chamber expansions, which should be mentioned here as well, and these give you the opportunity to block some spaces or to allow additional actions. But these expansions come with a price tag, so these are definitely not stretch goals per se, at least that's the current state, what I read from the project page. Check out the project page on your own. Of course, there's also an English version available for you for more details on the expansions. Unfortunately, I cannot show you these as these were not part of this prototype. Please keep in mind that all the components you have just seen here are either from the old version or prototype components, so I guess there might be some changes in the final product. Some final words from me that I keep short as usual. Dolmen is a really easy to learn but relatively deep strategy game with basically no luck component. Every situation you find in this game is made by player decisions or interaction. So don't blame the dice or unbalanced player starting abilities or whatsoever in this one. If you enjoy brain games, then you will find a deep game with a good level of player interaction, or I would call it player dependency, which you definitely don't find in every Euro game, as you simply cannot score any victory points without the help of the other players. You still have to think about when to place the right dolmen, so should I put my dolmen with a value 4 directly as your first stone if I'm really sure that he ends up relatively high, or should I start with some kind of a decoy, so only placing my value 1 dolmen on that stack? So you really have to think a lot on when to place your dolmens and where to move your druids as well, of course, so you can get locked down pretty easily and then you lose a turn by smoking some herbs here in order to get your druid to flight. Hopefully you enjoyed my little preview here, and please check out the campaign page. Of course, I will post a link into the description of this video. I think the campaign is running for some more weeks, so at least 2 or 3 weeks, so you still have more than enough time to back it. And remember, it's definitely also interesting for gamers outside of Germany and even Europe, especially for the US. Hope to see you soon in one of my next videos, and until then, bye bye.